To our top news headlines. New this morning, we now know the name of the person charged in a Saturday night shooting in Mercer County. Kadesha Burch is charged with attempted murder and 5 counts of wanton endangerment after she allegedly shot a man at a home on Perryville Road in Harrodsburg. According to officers, a man found on scene was taken to a nearby hospital to treat non-life-threatening injuries. Burch is being held in the Boyle County Detention Center on a $50,000 bond.
4 days. That's all the time Kadesha Burch had to taste freedom before her life was brutally cut short. 4 days between walking out of jail on December 23rd, 2024, and becoming the victim of a murder so calculated that it would expose dangerous gaps in our justice system. This is a story of a 31-year-old mother from Springfield, Kentucky, whose desperate act of self-defense landed her behind bars while her abuser walked free. It's the story of a woman who fought to protect herself, only to discover that the system designed to serve justice had failed her completely. What you're about to hear isn't just another true crime story. It's a stark reminder of how quickly hope can turn to horror. Kadesha's final days were filled with Christmas joy and dreams of a fresh start. She had no idea that while she was planning her future, her past was plotting her destruction. By the end of this story, you'll understand why Kadesha's case has become a rallying cry for domestic violence reform. You'll discover the shocking details of how her killer funded his deadly mission and the terrifying lengths he went to ensure his plan would succeed.
A Milwaukee man is arrested in Kentucky after police there say he shot 2 women and killed one of them. That happened Friday morning, but as our Stephanie Quirk explains, the crimes he's accused of actually started Christmas Day right here in Milwaukee. Steph's here now in studio.
Yeah, Sam, 23-year-old Roosevelt Davis is in custody in Kentucky right now, charged with murder. But court documents say the guns he used in this shooting were bought with money stolen in Milwaukee.
Welcome back to True Crime Station, where we dive deep into cases that demand our attention and shed light on important social issues. I'm your host, and I want to thank each of you for being part of our community of truth seekers. Today's case is particularly significant because it highlights critical failures in our justice system that we all need to understand. If this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We cover cases that not only tell compelling stories, but also educate us about the world around us. Drop your thoughts in the comments below as we go through this case. Your perspective helps build our community of awareness and support for these important issues. Kadesha Burch was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel better. At 31, she had built a life centered around service to others and devotion to her 2 children. She was a devoted mother who put her children's needs above everything else. This was the woman Roosevelt Davis III encountered in early 2022. Davis, a former football player from Wisconsin, seemed charming at first. Like many abusers, he didn't reveal his true nature immediately. Instead, he drew her in with attention and affection.
Boom, boom. Oh, shit. Get it.
The early stages of their relationship appeared normal. Davis seemed supportive of Kadesha's goals and interested in being part of her life. But as their relationship progressed, subtle changes began to emerge. Davis started showing possessiveness that Kadesha initially mistook for love and protection. He wanted to know where she was at all times, who she was talking to, and what she was doing when they weren't together. The controlling behavior escalated slowly. What started as concern about her safety became demands about her schedule. What began as jokes about her independence became serious attempts to undermine her confidence. Davis was methodically breaking down the strong, independent woman he had initially been attracted to. When Kadesha became pregnant with Davis's child in 2023, the relationship took a darker turn. Pregnancy often marks a turning point in abusive relationships, as abusers recognize that their victims are now more vulnerable. For Davis, Kadesha's pregnancy became another tool of control. The birth of their child marked the beginning of the most dangerous phase of their relationship. Physical violence entered the relationship after the baby's arrival. Davis no longer bothered to hide his true nature. The violence wasn't random or impulsive. Davis used calculated intimidation tactics, threats, and their newborn child to maintain absolute control over Kadesha. For Kadesha, the realization that she was trapped in an abusive relationship was devastating. She had always been strong, independent, and capable of handling challenges. But Davis had systematically stripped away her confidence and isolated her from the people who could help her. The woman who had once been a pillar of strength in her community now found herself walking on eggshells in her own home, calculating every word and action to avoid triggering Davis's rage. She was living in constant fear, not just for herself but for her children. By October 2024, Kadesha Burch was living in constant terror. The man she had once trusted had become her greatest threat, and the violence in their relationship had escalated to life-threatening levels. Davis's control over her had become absolute, and his willingness to use physical force had reached a point where Kadesha genuinely feared for her life. The abuse had progressed beyond psychological manipulation. Davis was now regularly using physical intimidation and violence to maintain control. For Kadesha, the constant state of hypervigilance was exhausting. She had to anticipate Davis's moods, react to his demands, and protect her children from witnessing the worst of his behavior. The incident that would change everything happened in October 2024, during what Kadesha later described as one of the most terrifying moments of her life. According to her account, Davis escalated his violence to a level that made her believe she was about to die. During this confrontation, Davis allegedly strangled her, cutting off her ability to breathe and making her fear that she would never see her children again. In that moment of absolute terror, faced with what she believed was imminent death, Kadesha made a split-second decision that would alter her life forever. She shot Roosevelt Davis III, claiming self-defense against what she perceived as a lethal attack. For Kadesha, this wasn't a planned action or a moment of revenge. It was a desperate attempt to save her own life when she believed she had no other option.
Kadesha Burch is charged with attempted murder and 5 counts of wanton endangerment after she allegedly shot a man at a home on Perryville Road in Harrodsburg. According to officers, a man found on scene was taken to a nearby hospital to treat non-life-threatening injuries. Burch is being held in the Boyle County Detention Center on a $50,000 bond.
The aftermath of the shooting revealed cruel ironies that often plague domestic violence cases. While Kadesha had acted in what she believed was self-defense, the legal system's response would prove to be another form of victimization. Despite her claims of self-defense and the documented history of abuse, Kadesha found herself facing the full weight of criminal charges. The evidence of Davis's abusive behavior toward Kadesha was substantial. Davis, despite being shot and despite the allegations of abuse against him, remained free while Kadesha was arrested and charged with attempted murder. This reversal of roles, the victim becoming the defendant while the alleged abuser maintained his freedom, highlighted dangerous gaps in how the justice system handles domestic violence cases. The charges against Kadesha sent shockwaves through her community. People who knew her couldn't reconcile the woman they had known with someone who would commit attempted murder. But those closest to her understood that this was exactly the kind of impossible situation that domestic violence victims face when the system fails them. For Kadesha, being arrested and charged was devastating. The woman who had tried to save her own life was being punished for that act of self-preservation. While Kadesha sat in jail, processing trauma and preparing for her defense, Roosevelt Davis III was making his own preparations, plans that would prove far more dangerous than anyone could have expected. December 23rd, 2024, should have been one of the happiest days of Kadesha Burch's life in months. After spending weeks behind bars, facing the terrifying prospect of a lengthy prison sentence for defending herself, she was finally going home. Her family had worked tirelessly to raise a $10,000 bond, with her mother and members of her church contributing to secure her temporary freedom. The moment Kadesha walked out of jail, she was surrounded by the love and support she had been missing. Her children, who had been staying with family members, were overjoyed to have their mother back. For Kadesha, the feeling of freedom was overwhelming. After weeks of living in a cell, even the simple act of choosing what to wear felt like a luxury. But Kadesha's freedom came with conditions and ongoing stress. She still faced serious criminal charges, and her legal battle was far from over. Despite the legal challenges ahead, Kadesha began making plans for a fresh start. She had learned from her experience with Davis that staying in the same location where he could easily find her was dangerous. She started discussing relocation plans with her family, looking at options that would allow her to start over in a place where she and her children could feel safe. The Christmas season took on special meaning for Kadesha and her family. This was their first Christmas together in months, and they were determined to make it memorable. Kadesha threw herself into creating positive experiences for her children, who had been through so much upheaval. As Christmas Day approached, Kadesha felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. She was with her children. She had community support, and she had concrete plans for starting over. What Kadesha didn't know was that her hope was being watched from a distance. While she was planning her future, Roosevelt Davis III was making very different kinds of plans. While Kadesha Burch was celebrating Christmas with her family and planning for a hopeful future, Roosevelt Davis III was planning one of the most chilling murder plots imaginable. Davis's actions during this period revealed the calculated nature of his violence. This wasn't a crime of passion or spontaneous anger. Every step he took was deliberate, planned, and designed to ensure that his ultimate goal, killing Kadesha, would be achieved. The first phase of Davis's plan was shocking. He decided to rob a bank to fund his murder plot. Bank robbery is a federal crime that carries severe penalties, but Davis was willing to risk everything to get the money he needed for his deadly mission. This decision demonstrates the depth of his obsession with Kadesha and his complete disregard for consequences. The bank robbery was successful from Davis's perspective. He managed to steal a significant amount of money without being immediately caught, giving him the financial resources he needed. For Davis, this wasn't just about getting money. It was about taking the first concrete step toward ending Kadesha's life. With the stolen bank funds in hand, Davis immediately began shopping for the tools he would need to commit murder. His first purchases were 2 firearms, chosen specifically for their lethal capacity. The fact that he bought multiple weapons suggests that he was planning not just to kill Kadesha, but to be prepared for any resistance he might encounter. Once he had acquired his weapons and gear, Davis began the journey from Wisconsin to Kentucky. This wasn't a short trip made in anger. It was a long drive that gave him plenty of time to reconsider his actions and choose a different path. Instead, he used the travel time to finalize his plan and prepare mentally for what he was about to do. The fact that Davis knew where to find Kadesha is particularly troubling. Despite her efforts to start fresh and her family's attempts to keep her safe, he had somehow tracked her location. As Davis approached Kentucky, he was carrying stolen money, illegal weapons, and a plan to commit murder. By December 27, 2024, all of Davis's preparations were complete. December 27, 2024, began like any other day for Kadesha Burch and her family. She was staying at a house on Claybrook Avenue, surrounded by the people who loved her and wanted to keep her safe. The Christmas celebrations were still fresh in everyone's minds, and there was a sense of normalcy that had been missing from their lives for months. But Roosevelt Davis III had different plans for that day. After driving from Wisconsin with his stolen money, purchased weapons, and camouflage clothing, he had arrived in Springfield, Kentucky with one goal: to end Kadesha's life. His preparations were complete, his resolve was firm, and his opportunity had finally arrived. Davis approached the house on Claybrook Avenue with the tactical mindset he had been cultivating throughout his planning process. He was dressed in his camouflage clothing, armed with multiple weapons, and operating under the cover of darkness. This wasn't a confrontation or an argument that got out of hand. This was a planned assassination carried out by someone who had spent considerable time and resources preparing for this moment. The break-in itself was swift and violent. Davis forced his way into the house, where Kadesha and her family believed they were safe. The sense of security that had been so important to Kadesha's healing process was shattered in an instant. The home that should have been a refuge became a crime scene. Once inside the house, Davis moved quickly to locate his primary target. He wasn't there to steal anything or to make demands. He was there to kill Kadesha Burch, and nothing was going to stop him from achieving that goal. When Davis found Kadesha, he shot her multiple times. The woman who had survived his abuse fought back in self-defense, endured months in jail, and was finally beginning to rebuild her life, was killed in her own temporary sanctuary. But Davis's violence didn't stop with Kadesha. Another woman in the house was also shot during the attack. Unlike Kadesha, the second victim survived her injuries, but she became a witness to the calculated brutality that Davis had brought into their home. Her survival would later prove crucial to the investigation and prosecution of Davis's crimes. The attack was over quickly, but its impact was devastating and permanent. In a matter of minutes, Davis had destroyed the life that Kadesha had been trying so hard to rebuild. After the shooting, Davis fled the scene, but his escape was short-lived. Law enforcement agencies were quickly mobilized, and Davis was arrested before he could get far from the crime scene. The charges against Davis were swift and severe: murder, attempted murder, and burglary. The evidence against him was overwhelming, from the weapons found in his possession to the witness testimony of the surviving victim. The murder of Kadesha Burch sent shockwaves through Springfield, Kentucky, and beyond, but the tragedy was about more than just one woman's death. Her case became a stark illustration of how domestic violence victims can be failed by the very systems designed to protect them, and how these failures can have deadly consequences.
Day was a baby. I've eaten at the grandmother's table and the grandfather's. We got a long history together.
He described Day Day as a joyful person, as someone who was a light for others.
That she would help you and nobody would have to know. And so to be such a young person in her 30s, that's unusual, because today we want to blow our own horn.
The most glaring systemic failure in Kadesha's case was a reversal of victim and perpetrator roles in the legal system. When Kadesha shot Davis in what she claimed was self-defense, she became the one facing criminal charges, while her alleged abuser remained free. This reversal is unfortunately common in domestic violence cases, where victims who fight back are often treated more harshly than their abusers. The decision to charge Kadesha with attempted murder, while allowing Davis to remain free, created a dangerous situation that ultimately cost her life. While she was in jail, unable to protect herself or plan for her safety, Davis was free to plan his revenge. The system that should have been evaluating the threat he posed to her safety instead treated him as the victim of her violence. Legal experts who examined Kadesha's case pointed out that domestic violence situations require specialized understanding and training to handle properly. The dynamics of abusive relationships, the psychological impact of prolonged abuse, and the legitimate fear that drives victims to fight back are complex issues that require more than standard criminal justice responses. The failure to recognize Davis as a continuing danger to Kadesha had fatal consequences. The case also highlighted problems with how domestic violence victims are supported during legal proceedings. Kadesha was fighting not just for her freedom but for her life, yet she was navigating a system that seemed designed to work against her interests. The resources available to help domestic violence victims understand their legal options and protect themselves during court proceedings proved inadequate in her case. Mental health professionals who work with domestic violence victims pointed out that Kadesha's case illustrates why leaving an abusive relationship is often the most dangerous time for victims. Statistics show that domestic violence victims are at highest risk of being killed when they try to leave their abusers. Yet the support systems for victims during this critical period are often insufficient. What makes Kadesha's case particularly tragic is that it was preventable. If the system had properly recognized the threat Davis posed, if adequate protection measures had been put in place, if the complexities of domestic violence had been better understood and addressed, she might still be alive today. Her death serves as a powerful reminder of the urgent need for reform in how we handle domestic violence cases. Kadesha Burch's story didn't end with her death. In the days, weeks, and months that followed her murder, her case became a catalyst for important conversations about domestic violence, victim protection, and systemic reform. The woman who had been failed by the system in life became a powerful voice for change in death. Her family, devastated by their loss, made the difficult decision to speak publicly about what had happened to Kadesha. They shared details about her life, her struggles with Davis, and her fight for justice, hoping that her story might prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. Their courage in speaking out during their time of grief helped ensure that Kadesha's death would have meaning beyond the immediate tragedy. Domestic violence advocacy organizations embrace Kadesha's case as a teaching tool and a call to action. Her story illustrated so many of the problems they have been trying to address. The way victims are often criminalized for defending themselves, the lack of adequate protection during legal proceedings, and the deadly danger that victims face when trying to leave abusive relationships. Organizations use her case to push for legislative changes and increase funding for victim services. Legal professionals began using Kadesha's case in training programs to help law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and judges better understand complexities of domestic violence cases. Her story became a stark example of how well-intentioned legal processes can actually endanger the people they're meant to protect. Kadesha's case also sparked important conversations about the intersection of race, gender, and domestic violence. Many observers noted that as a Black woman, Kadesha faced additional barriers in getting help and being believed by the system. Her story highlighted the need for culturally competent responses to domestic violence that take into account the unique challenges faced by women of color. The most important lesson from Kadesha's story is that domestic violence is not just a private matter between two people. It's a public safety issue that requires coordinated community response. Her case showed that when systems fail to work together effectively, the consequences can be deadly.
People in Washington County gathered tonight to honor a woman who was shot and killed inside her home last week. This is Wave News at 11. I'm Noelle Friel. Police say Roosevelt Davis III robbed a bank in Wisconsin and then traveled to Kentucky, where he shot and killed Kadesha Burch, also shooting and wounding her mother. Wave News reporter Fernando Garcia Francischini was at the candlelight vigil held in Burch's memory tonight. He joins us with how the community is remembering her.
This family is intermingled into my personal family.
Kadesha Burch was known by many in Springfield, and that was clear Sunday night when people from all over came together for a vigil in her memory. KSB says Burch was shot and killed inside a home on Claybrook Avenue on December 27th.
For those of us hearing Kadesha's story, the lessons are clear. We must do better. We must believe victims when they tell us they're in danger. We must ensure that the systems designed to protect them actually do so. We must recognize that domestic violence affects entire communities, not just individual families. Kadesha was more than just a victim of domestic violence. She was a devoted mother who worked at a daycare because she loved caring for children. She was an active member of her church community who showed up for others in their times of need. She was a woman who ran a small business to provide better opportunities for her family. She was someone who fought to protect herself when she felt her life was in danger, and someone who never stopped hoping for a better future for her children. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how our society handles domestic violence. It shows us that the people we trust to protect victims can sometimes become the very systems that endanger them. It demonstrates that the moment when a victim tries to leave an abusive relationship is often the most dangerous time, yet it's also when they may receive the least protection. The man who killed Kadesha, Roosevelt Davis III, now faces the consequences of his actions. But no amount of punishment can bring back the life he took or heal the trauma he inflicted on her family and community. The real measure of justice for Kadesha will be whether her death leads to meaningful changes that protect other women in similar situations. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please know that help is available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline can be reached 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233, and they have resources available in multiple languages. Local organizations in your community may also provide services like emergency shelter, legal advocacy, and safety planning. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you want to stay informed about cases like Kadesha's that highlight important social issues. Your engagement helps ensure that these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Kadesha Burch's life mattered. Her story matters. And the lessons we learn from her tragedy could save lives in the future. Let's make sure her death was not in vain by working together to create a world where domestic violence victims receive the protection and support they deserve. Thank you for watching True Crime Station. Until next time, stay safe, and remember that awareness can save lives.